Hey guys, and welcome back for another episode in my history series, or if you're new here, hi, I'm Georgia. Today we're going to be discussing something called Section 28. I actually had planned a different UK LGBT story to tell today, but I was inspired by this tweet and realised I wanted to talk about Section 28 instead, as so much of our queer culture today and understanding of queer history has been blighted by Margaret Thatcher and her Conservative government. You may also occasionally hear Section 28 referred to as Clause 28, or in Scotland, Clause 2A. Before I let past Georgia get on with the video though, I want to take a moment to thank the sponsor this week, HelloFresh. My favourite sponsor. I absolutely love HelloFresh and have used them for years, ever since I first moved out of my parents' home and realised I had no idea how to cook. As you may now know, I am an avid chef now. I love cooking and I genuinely put that down to HelloFresh teaching me to love it. And in case you doubt me, here is my HelloFresh recipe book and the majority of the meals I've cooked over the years. These are like all my favourite ones. I'm a hardcore fan. I can't open it to show you because I haven't put them all in properly and they'll all fall out. HelloFresh provide meal kits straight to your front door every single week. You don't have to think too much about it, they do all of the hard work for you, it all arrives at peak freshness so you can just enjoy the cooking, most of which only takes around 30 minutes. The meal I had last night, the chorizo and sweet corn pasta, only took 20 minutes to cook and it went down a treat. They have so many delicious recipes to choose from. I am a self-confessed fussy eater and even I've never struggled to find meals I like on HelloFresh. HelloFresh saves time and stress, removing stressful meal planning and trips to the supermarket from your week. It's super flexible, you can add extra dinners, lunches, breakfast, desserts, or sides whenever you want to. You can skip weeks entirely, no problem, or change your delivery day to what works best for you. And I've noticed that I barely waste any food when I'm using HelloFresh. They provide the perfect amount of ingredients for each meal, which is A, great for the environment, and B, great for me not having to take the bin out too often because that is my least favourite job. HelloFresh's carbon footprint is 25% lower than that of meals made from store-bought groceries, which is something I never knew but makes me feel even better about my choices. And in 2020, HelloFresh donated over 4 million meals to charity, continuing to step up their food donations amid the coronavirus crisis. I just love this company so much, you guys. If you're interested in trying HelloFresh out, and I highly recommend you do, go to hellofresh.com and use my code georgiamarie14 to get 14 free meals, including free shipping. That's use code georgiamarie14 at hellofresh.com to get 14 free meals, including free shipping. It is such a great deal and I highly recommend that you try them out. Section 28 was included in the Local Government Act of 1988, introduced after Margaret Thatcher first announced her opposition to gay rights at the Conservative Party conference in Blackpool the year before. In the late 80s, there had been a surge of demand for equality from the gay community, and the Conservatives replied to that by going in the opposite direction, saying that children needed to be taught to respect traditional moral values, that they were being cheated of a sound start in life.
But it's the plight of individual boys and girls which worries me most. Too often, our children don't get the education they need, the education they deserve. Children who need to be taught to respect traditional moral values are being taught that they have an inalienable right to be gay. All of those children are being cheated of a sound start in life. Yes, cheated.
The clause, which was officially enacted on the 24th of May 1988, was rather vaguely worded, but essentially prohibited local authorities from intentionally promoting homosexuality or publishing material with the intention of promoting homosexuality, as well as from promoting the teaching in any maintained school the acceptability of homosexuality as a pretended family relationship. Essentially, local councils were banned from distributing any material which portrayed gay relationships as anything other than wrong and abnormal. This included teachers and educational staff, and this was the first new homophobic anti-LGBT law to be introduced in the UK in over a century. The wording of the clause was ambiguous, and the definition of promotion was understood differently by each local council and person. Some took it to mean that no mention of homosexuality was to be made at all, others took it as no positive mention, and others took it as anything in between. Breaking these rules was not so much a criminal offence, and no prosecution ever actually happened underneath it. In May 2000, the Christian Institute did try to take Glasgow City Council to court for funding an AIDS support charity, but it was unsuccessful. Nobody was prosecuted. But if you were caught distributing anything pro-gay, then you could lose significant funding from the government. The majority of schools and councils across the UK were and are already hugely underfunded, and the risk of this was just too great. Not to mention, the majority of people across the UK were only too happy to comply. We'll get to some stats in just a second, but the majority of UK residents didn't agree with homosexuality anyway, so this clause didn't really affect them. As a direct result of Section 28, a huge amount of LGBT support groups across the country ended up disbanding for fear of repercussions. UK society in the late 80s had reached a point where a number of schools and colleges had LGBT student support groups, but they were soon closed because of fear by local council staff that the Act would be breached and they'd get in trouble. Pretty much overnight, all of the progress the UK had made in the previous couple of decades in gay rights was decimated, and the country took 10 steps backwards. I don't want to necessarily say that the UK was a pleasant place for queer people before Section 28, because that wasn't really the case. It was tough, there was a lot of discrimination, but society was definitely moving in the right direction, it seemed, and was moving ahead of a lot of other countries. In 1967, 2 years before Stonewall even happened over the pond in the USA, homosexual acts in the UK between men were decriminalised as part of the Sexual Offences Act. Now, this was on the condition that said acts were performed by 2 consenting adults over the age of 21, and it happened in a private home when no one else could potentially walk in. This actually passed 101 votes to 16, which is a pretty significant majority, and it received royal assent on the 21st of July 1967. As you would probably guess, Labour and Liberal members were mostly in favour, whilst Conservatives were mostly opposed. But in a shocking twist, Margaret Thatcher was actually one of the very few Conservatives who voted in favour of this. Apparently, the reason that Margaret Thatcher voted in favour of decriminalising homosexuality was because she'd previously worked as a barrister and had seen a huge waste of court time and invasion of the regular person's privacy with the arrest and trials of homosexual men. With this decriminalisation, homosexuality in British society went from illegal but discussed to legal but not always approved. But this wasn't sudden complete liberation. Statistics actually show that in the decade after the law passed, prosecutions for gross indecency involving males trebled. This was likely due to a combination of gay men feeling more liberated to be gay in public. I'm not talking sex in public, but like even holding hands and kissing, just showing affection. But also the police clamping down harder on anything that was outside the privacy of people's homes, not wanting the gayness to get out of control. After 1967, LGBTQ+ people in the UK began to feel more comfortable being who they were publicly. Following Stonewall and the first Pride March in New York in 1970, the first British gay pride rally was held in London in 1972, with 1,000 people marching from Trafalgar Square to Hyde Park. In 1980, a show called A Change of Sex aired on BBC Two, following Julia Grant's social and medical transition as a transgender woman in the UK. Gay Life, the first television series aimed at a gay audience, aired on London weekend television. In 1983, a controversial book called Jenny Lives with Erica Martin was published in the UK, after being released in Denmark the year before. As the title of the book may suggest, it was a book about 5-year-old Jenny, who lived with her father and his gay partner. The Daily Mail did run a small story about this at the time, stating that the book had been provided in a school library run by the Inner London Education Authority, but the major controversy around this book wouldn't arise for quite a few more years. Councils around London were beginning to adopt anti-discrimination policies, and in 1984, Labour MP Chris Smith becomes the first openly gay politician in UK Parliament, and the next year, the Gay Black Group receives council funding for the Black Lesbians and Gay Centre in South London. In 1985, Margaret Roth, an out lesbian, was elected as Mayor of Manchester. Gay activists forced alliances with labour unions and the National Union of Mine Workers, ensuring that the Labour Party adopted more progressive policies. Yes, I know a load of you have been asking for a video about this story, the miners and the gays, and it will be coming soon, not this month, but relatively soon, just keep an eye out for it. Although all relatively small in the grand scheme of things, it does show the trajectory LGBTQ+ rights were on in the early 80s. Upwards. But then things changed, and you can probably guess as to why. In the 80s, the AIDS crisis really hit its peak in the UK and around the rest of the world, bringing widespread fear alongside it. As I'm sure a lot of you know, when AIDS first surfaced, it was called GRID, gay-related immune deficiency, and many people believed that only gay men could be affected. Some people even went as far as believing that it was a punishment for homosexuality from God, and all of the steps that gay rights had made in the decades previously suddenly reverted. The general public didn't need much of an excuse to start openly opposing the gays again, and AIDS made the perfect catalyst. Especially when it became known that it wasn't only gay men who could catch the disease, that straight people could very much get it as well. This was a reason to force the gays back into hiding. Look what you've done. The UK was in panic mode. So, of course, as always happens, the right-wing media started exacerbating the situation. The LGBT community was the perfect scapegoat to assure that Thatcher and her Conservative government got re-elected at the upcoming 1987 election. To this day, the right-wing media in the UK is very capable of whipping up a frenzy based on very little fact. And with AIDS, they were able to create a whole lot of support for the party of traditional moral values, the Conservative Party. Labour was to blame for AIDS, you see. They had enabled homosexuals to be in positions of power, to form unions, to live outwardly. And now look what had happened. People were dying. Vote Conservative. But the straw that actually broke the camel's back, it seems, was the children's book I mentioned before, Jenny Lives with Erica Martin. As I said, this actually first got published in the UK in 1983, but apart from an article or two in a couple of newspapers, nobody really paid that much attention, nobody really cared. But in 1986, the papers were looking to rile up the public, and all of a sudden the book was discovered in a library of the Labour-controlled Inner London Education Authority. Even then, there was actually only one copy of this book in a teacher's resource centre, and children couldn't just come across it without express parental permission. But facts don't matter. The Daily Mail had a field day with headlines such as "Save the Children from Sad Sordid Sex Lessons" and "Bizarre Truth About Happy Family in Gay School Book." It was announced that Labour was to blame, that they supported paedophilia because being gay dads equals paedophilia apparently, and that Labour were trying to pollute the minds of the country's children. A British social attitude survey at the time revealed that 75% of the population thought that homosexuality was always or mostly wrong. The Conservative election campaign issued posters claiming that the Labour Party and the Gay Liberation Front wanted to introduce more gay books in school, including titles like Young, Gay and Proud, Police Out of School, and the Playbook for Kids About Sex. The horror. And that same year, in 1986, a man called Lord Halsbury tabled a private member's bill in the House of Lords, which was to prevent local authorities from promoting homosexuality. This law did successfully pass the House of Lords at the time, and was adopted by Conservative MP Jill Knight, the Baroness Knight of Collingtree. But because of the imminent general election, the bill failed, and at the time, even the Conservatives thought the proposition was a little bit too risky. But then, at the end of 1987, they kind of came back around to the idea. The bill was reintroduced as an amendment to the already passed 1988 Local Government Bill, and it was a very similar clause to what Halsbury had suggested, but not quite identical. This time it was entitled Clause 28, or Section 28. Jill Knight championed this bill, later saying that she fought for it to pass because she was the chairman of the Child and Family Protection Group, who had apparently been contacted by parents who strongly objected to their children being taught and encouraged into a homosexual lifestyle, and that they were also being taught that a normal family with mummy and daddy was outdated. It just makes me laugh because it's still the exact same kind of propaganda that we see today with right-wing media. I'm not sure how many of you might have seen the recent outcry over people wanting to swap the terms mother and father for more gender-neutral terms. No one really wants that. Nobody's trying to take away the words mum and dad. That just hasn't happened. But right-wing media can use that to outrage people. Look at what this world is turning into. It's ridiculous. Vote Conservative. In the arguments around this proposed bill, Labour MPs such as Diane Abbott and Ken Livingstone raised their concerns about it violating human rights. But regardless, Section 28 became law on the 24th of May 1988. In the weeks before, people all across the UK protested, including protests in all the major cities. The night before it came into law, lesbian groups abseiled into Parliament and invaded the BBC's 6 o'clock news, one woman literally chaining herself to the news desk. The wonderful Ian McKellen even came out on BBC Three Radio to openly oppose Section 28 and attempt to get it stopped before it came into action. Knowing that coming out could have put an end to his career, he considered it more important for people to know, and later said, "My own participating in that campaign was a focus for people to take comfort that if Ian McKellen was on board for this, perhaps it would be alright for other people to be as well, gay and straight." This marked the beginning of Ian McKellen's active participation in LGBT rights, and he went on to co-found Stonewall, possibly the most well-known LGBT rights lobby group and charity in the UK, as well as doing so many other amazing things over the years. With the passing of the law, there was confusion as to how much it really affected schools. The law applied directly to local authorities, but did schools fall under that umbrella? The National Union of Teachers said that whilst Section 28 applies to local authorities and not to schools, many teachers believe, albeit wrongly, that it imposes constraints in respect of the advice and counselling they give to pupils. Professional judgment is therefore influenced by the perceived prospect of prosecution. It limits the ability of local authorities to support schools in respect of learning and education for equality. The effect of Section 28, therefore, is to inhibit anti-discrimination initiatives and make it difficult for schools to prevent or address the serious problems that arise from homophobic bullying. But then the Department of Education and Science said, Section 28 does not affect the activities of school governors nor of teachers. It will not prevent the objective discussion of homosexuality in the classroom, nor the counselling of pupils concerned about their sexuality. To which it's reported Jill Knight responded, "This has got to be a mistake. The major point of it was to protect children in schools from having homosexuality thrust upon them." Supporters of Section 28 very much argued that it did apply to schools. You weren't allowed to mention gayness, nor help children being bullied because of homophobia. And because of this ambiguity and not wanting to break the law or lose local funding, schools just complied. There was no same-sex, sex or relationship education. It was never even mentioned as a possibility. The first decade of my life was under Section 28, and I can attest to the fact that I didn't even know gay was a possibility until my teens. It was never mentioned, it was never a thing. Teachers couldn't even speak to students who were being bullied for being gay. They had to brush it under the carpet and ignore it completely. Acknowledging a child being bullied for being gay was acknowledging homosexuality, and that was not allowed. In a time when sex education, particularly for gay men, could literally have saved lives, teachers were just banned from talking about it. I must say, I was 9 years old when Section 28 was repealed, and that was in 2003, but it's not like same-sex sex education suddenly became a thing overnight as of 2003. I finished school in 2012, and not once was same-sex education ever brought up. Sex education was put a condom on a banana and call it a day. If even heterosexual sex education is lacking, then anything else stands no chance. But hey, at least it wasn't abstinence only, I suppose. It has taken years for some schools to even consider the possibility of same-sex sex education. And I know that some schools around the country are opening up to wider sex education now, but there is still a way to go. If you are still in school in the UK or recently finished, please let me know if things have improved at all, because obviously I finished nearly a decade now, so I don't really know. So many children grew up in the 90s under Section 28, just insecure, confused that they don't feel the way they should, but not understanding who they are and why they feel this way. You begin to change yourself just to fit in, and if you did know what gay was, you knew it was wrong. And I'm sure you can imagine the bullying that came along with this. Children easily being able to pick up on the others and know that they could bully them with no consequences. You simply just didn't see gay people on TV, really. I mean, I remember the first time I saw a gay woman on TV, I was obsessed. Shout out to anyone else who remembers the show Sugar Rush on Channel 4. I think it aired in 2005 and 2006. I watched that so many times. I didn't know at the time why I loved it so much, but I did. There were basically no gay characters on primetime TV throughout the 90s, as that could be seen as promotion of homosexuality. In 1987, EastEnders showed the first ever same-sex kiss on UK TV. It was just a kiss on the forehead between two gay characters. They had a whole storyline planned out, but it had to be cut when Section 28 was enacted. In January 1989, they showed the first mouth-to-mouth gay kiss, just this chaste peck on the lips. This was hugely controversial and the media went mad. Piers Morgan, yep, that Piers Morgan, called it a homosexual love scene between yuppie puffs, just in case you want another excuse to hate him. As the years went on, the issue of homosexuality began to become a real point of contention within the Conservative Party. People were literally fired for disagreeing with the party stance, which was obviously homosexuality is bad. But as years went on, some Conservative members started to see that maybe it wasn't so bad after all. But of course, it wasn't a Conservative government responsible for the eventual repeal of Section 28. It was Labour under Tony Blair's government. It was February 2000 when the first attempted legislation to repeal Section 28 was introduced by the Labour government, but it was defeated by a House of Lords campaign led by a woman called Baroness Young. She just hated the gays and fought against any tolerant legislation towards homosexuality. She really was awful. The legislation for repeal was more successful though in the new Scottish Parliament. Despite plenty of opposition, on the 21st of June 2000, Section 2A, as it was called in Scotland, was repealed as part of the Ethical Standards in Public Life Act 2000, with a huge majority vote of 99 to 17. Over the next couple of years in England, the repeal was put through the House of Lords multiple times to no avail, but eventually the Labour government succeeded in passing their new legislation as part of the Local Government Act 2003. The repeal officially became effective on the 18th of November 2003. Schools could now once again dare to utter the word gay, and so could local councils. Not that they really did. The damage caused by Section 28 would cause a ripple effect for years that we're still feeling. A 2003 survey by Stonewall of 300 secondary schools found that 82% of teachers were aware of verbal incidents linked to homophobia and 26% knew of physical attacks. Only 6% of schools had anti-bullying policies in place, which included homophobia. Mind, the mental health charity, say that 2 in 3 LGBT people are likely to have mental health problems, likely due to homophobia fueled by Section 28, how children and adults could bully with no consequence, and teachers weren't allowed to help, or at least thought they weren't allowed to help. This is a whole generation of queer children who are now in their 20s and 30s affected by this legislation. Either invisible or bullied children with zero representation, no one to look up to, no way to know that everything would work out fine. Is it really surprising that 2 in 3 have mental health issues? But officially, as of 2003, Section 28 was repealed. Apart from in Kent, where the county council decided to create their own version of Section 28 to keep the effect of the law in their schools. They said that heterosexual marriage and family relationships were the only firm foundations for society. Thankfully, this was quashed by the Equality Act of 2010. In 2018, Scotland became the first country in the world to mandate an LGBTI inclusive curriculum across all state schools, which is incredible. Scotland always seems to be that one step ahead. In retrospect, a lot of MPs who supported Section 28 at the time have apologised or at least expressed regret, having realised their prejudices in the passage of time. They said that Section 28 dealt with a very specific problem at the time, a problem which only could have been a problem in the melting pot of the 80s. Despite in the year 2000 David Cameron attacking Labour's plans to abolish Section 28, in June 2009, when he was the leader of the Conservative Party, he apologised for his party's introduction of the law, saying it was a mistake. He became Prime Minister the following year, and under the coalition government, he passed same-sex marriage in the UK in 2013. There are plenty of worse places in the world to be LGBTQ+ than in the UK, and I'm grateful every day that this is where I was born and raised. But it hurts my heart that we could have been so much further ahead in rights and understanding if Section 28 had just never been passed, if it had never happened. 15 years of education and acceptance were completely lost, replaced with bullying and hatred, just so a political party could win an election. I wonder how many lives were inadvertently lost because of this, because of the snowball effect that this had. According to an article in The Independent, the number of LGBT teachers rose from 5% to 9% between 2014 and 2018. Many of them state their reasoning for becoming teachers was so they could address things like sexuality in the classroom, become the representation that so many people need, things they didn't have growing up. As I mentioned earlier in the video, if you are in the UK and have learned about same-sex relationships in school, then please leave a comment or tell me what it's like wherever you are in the world. Don't forget to check out HelloFresh in the top line of the description box down below. Use my code georgiamarie12 for 14 free meals, including free shipping. Honestly guys, that is an incredible deal. I would highly recommend you check it out. I love HelloFresh and just want to spread the word to everyone. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye guys.